My name is Olivia. I'm 29 years old. The dishwasher was running when my marriage cracked open. Not loudly, not with a scream, not with a slammed door, not with a confession dragged out into the yard for the neighbors to hear. It split under warm kitchen light in a clean suburban house in Kentucky, while the smell of lemon detergent, cold roast chicken, and stale coffee hung in the air like nothing bad was allowed to happen there. I came in barefoot from the laundry room with a folded bath towel over one arm. My husband was already at the dining table. Printer paper was spread out in front of him in neat rows. Straight lines, squared corners, careful stacks. The kind of careful that feels worse than anger. He looked up once. His face was pale around the mouth, not furious, not wild, just tight, drained. Essa resolved in a way that made my stomach drop before I even saw the pages. Then he pushed them toward me with two fingers and said, "Do you want to tell me why your own brother sent me this?" For half a second, I honestly thought I had walked into the middle of some joke that had gone too far. Then I looked down. My name was on the pages, my face was in the photos, my number showed up in screenshots I had never sent. There were cropped messages that made me sound flirtatious, secretive, cheap. A grainy picture of me climbing into a silver truck outside a Walmart. A partial text thread about last night and keeping this between us. A contact saved as baby, attached to a number I didn't know. A photo of me hugging a man in a blue work shirt in a parking lot. I knew that man. He was my cousin Daniel. His mother had just died. And I had hugged him outside the funeral home because he couldn't breathe properly through the crying. But grief looks guilty if somebody wants it to. I set the towel down on the counter without realizing I had done it, then picked up the first page again because the human brain is stupid when it gets cornered. It thinks maybe the trap will disappear if you look harder. Maybe the angle was wrong. Maybe the eyes were wrong. Maybe reality will get embarrassed and correct itself. My fingertips had already started to go numb. "Where did you get these?" I asked. "Your brother sent them." "Mason?" "Yes." He said my brother's name like it tasted rotten. There were more pages underneath. Edited screenshots, missing dates, clipped messages with all the shape cut out of them. One image showed a text bubble from me saying, he still believes me." Another showed a hotel booking confirmation with my first name and an email address so close to mine it made my skin crawl. That was the part that hit hardest at first. Not the fake sex, not even the accusation. The detail. The intimate, patient detail. Whoever made it knew exactly what Ethan would notice. Exactly what would look believable. Exactly which ordinary scraps of my real life could be arranged into something poisonous. I sat down without planning to. The chair hit the back of my knees and suddenly I was in it. The wood felt too hard, the room felt too cold. The house had changed temperature in less than a minute. "This isn't real," I said. "Olivia, it isn't." "Then explain it." That word landed harder than the papers, explain it, like love had already moved into evidence review. Kick, like I had already been shifted to the defense side of the room. Behind us, the dishwasher hummed. A car rolled down the street outside. Somewhere next door, a dog barked once and stopped. The refrigerator clicked. The clock over the stove kept going. Every ordinary sound in the world kept doing its job while mine got pinned to that chair. "You know me," I said. "I thought I did. You know I would never do this. Your own brother says he sat on this for months because he didn't want to wreck our marriage unless he had to." There it was, the voice Mason always used when he wanted to sound decent while he cut you open, concerned, reluctant, burdened by truth. I could already see it without even reading the whole thread. Paragraphs of regret, brotherly duty, at the tired little heroism of a man who claims he did not want to speak but was forced by conscience. Ethan handed me his phone. I looked. There it was. Long messages from Mason, carefully worded, measured, sickeningly calm. "I tried to keep Olivia covered because she's my sister, but you deserve the truth." I stared at that sentence until the screen blurred. He had timed it, built it, packaged it. No drunk outburst, no sloppy accusation, no loose thread he couldn't control. He had sent it on a weeknight after dinner, when most women are wiping counters and most husbands are too tired to fight their own fear. He had built a file that looked like concern and delivered it at the exact hour a marriage is most defenseless. "Call him," I said. "I already did." My head snapped up. And? He said he was sorry. I let out a laugh that didn't sound like mine. Not because anything was funny, because the cruelty was so polished it crossed over into something almost unreal. Mason and I grew up 2 years apart in the same split-level house, with the same father who measured love and usefulness, and the same mother who treated sons like unfinished kings. When we were little, Mason stole my Halloween candy and said he was protecting me from cavities. When we were teenagers, he borrowed my car, left beer cans under the seat, and told our parents I must have had boys in it. When he lied, he didn't do it messily. He liked clean sabotage. He liked plausible sabotage. He liked the kind that made you sound crazy for objecting. He was never the family disaster in the obvious way. He was worse, he was controlled. And still, some stupid part of me had spent years hoping adulthood would soften him. It never did. Ethan stood up then and went to the sink. He braced both hands on the counter and kept them there like he needed the granite to hold him up. "Tell me if any of it is true." "None of it. The photos are real." "Some of the photos are real, not the story." "Who's the truck?" "A plumber from the condo office where I used to work. He gave me a ride to my car when it wouldn't start." "And you never mentioned that." "Because it meant nothing." He turned then, finally angry, not loud, not shouting, just cut open. "See, that's the problem," he said. "Suddenly every small thing feels like a hidden room." I wanted to throw the coffee pot through the wall. Instead, I gripped the edge of the chair until my nails pressed crescents into the wood. The problem is that my brother manufactured this." "Out of nowhere?" "No, out of envy, control, malice. Pick one." "You want me to believe he did all this for no reason?" "No," I said. "I want you to believe he did it because he's Mason." But that is the problem with family damage. A husband does not marry your whole childhood. He marries the edited summary. He meets your brother at Thanksgiving when the pie is still warm and the jokes are harmless enough to pass. He sees the version who claps him on the back and says, "Man, take care of my sister." He hears concern and thinks concern. He does not hear the years under it. He was not there when Mason learned that if he smiled first, adults trusted him. He was not there when blame slid off Mason and landed on me so often it started to feel assigned. He was not there for the private grin after the lie worked. So now, sitting in my own kitchen, with fake screenshots and real fear between us, Ethan looked at me like the burden had shifted. "Prove it." That night he slept in the guest room. He said he needed space. Space is a civilized word for fracture. It sounds mature, measured, reasonable. But what it means is this: I no longer feel safe enough to sleep beside you. The next morning he barely touched his coffee. Friday, he took 3 shirts, his shaving kit, his laptop charger, and a pair of running shoes to a friend's house in Lexington. He said it was temporary. He said he needed time. He said trust was not a switch. I kept standing in doorways after he left. Bedroom doorway, bathroom doorway, the hallway between the kitchen and living room. I'd like my body had forgotten what room belonged to me now. Like I was waiting for a sentence to be pronounced from somewhere above the house. Mason called twice. I let it ring. Then he texted, "You should have told him yourself. I tried to protect you. Don't make me the bad guy." I stared at the screen until my jaw ached. Then I took screenshots. Not because I had a plan yet, because some instinct in me, some part that had finally gotten tired of being the only person asked to rely on trust, started waking up. Saturday morning, my mother called while I was in line at Starbucks in yesterday's sweatshirt with my hair twisted up wrong. A woman in front of me was ordering 6 drinks for what sounded like an entire soccer team. The espresso machine screamed. Ice clattered into plastic cups. Then somebody behind me sighed like I was taking up too much air. "Sweetheart," my mother said, "I heard there's some trouble." "From who?" "Mason called. He's very upset." Of course he was. They always are, men like him. They injure and then arrive first with the wound. "Did he tell you he faked evidence?" I asked. "He said Ethan received some things that looked concerning." "Mom, I'm not taking sides." That sentence should be bronzed and mounted above the fireplaces of weak people everywhere. I'm not taking sides. It sounds fair, balanced, adult. Most of the time it means this: I already know who will survive being left alone. "You are taking a side," I said. "No, honey, I'm trying to stay calm." "Did he tell you he edited screenshots?" "He said the proof looked real." "Because it was designed to." A pause. And then she said it. The line that belonged to our whole family long before this week. "Your brother wouldn't do this without a reason." There it was. The old religion. Men destroy for reasons, women suffer under suspicion, and everyone else asks for calm. I stepped out of line without my coffee and walked back into the parking lot feeling like my skin had become the wrong size. The drive home was full of petty little violences. Red lights that seemed timed against me. A school bus stopping too long at an intersection. A man in a pickup laying on his horn when I hesitated turning left. The radio playing a cheerful ad for patio furniture like spring was still something soft and buyable. Normal life kept throwing itself at me while mine came apart in private folders and family phone calls. The next week was full of humiliations so practical they almost felt insulting. Changing the Netflix password because Ethan had already changed it first. Finding his wedding ring in the bathroom drawer and standing there with it cold in my palm. Seeing money move out of our joint checking account into a separate personal account he had apparently always kept just in case. Just in case. That phrase makes cowards sound wise. At the apartment office where I worked part-time doing leasing paperwork, I smiled at prospective renters and explained pet deposits while my husband took 6 hours to answer a text. One afternoon I spent 40 minutes under the fluorescent misery of the DMV renewing my license, because adulthood does not pause for betrayal. And I stood there holding a little paper number while a child cried 3 seats down and a woman argued about proof of address. And I remember thinking how obscene it was that the government still expected me to function like a woman whose life made sense. When Ethan finally agreed to meet, he chose a coffee shop near the interstate. Not home. That hurt more than the silence had. Public places are for first dates, job interviews, and breakups, not for marriages trying not to drown. He looked exhausted. His beard had grown in badly. He kept rubbing one thumb over the cardboard sleeve on his cup. He wouldn't look at me for long at a time. "I'm trying here," he said. "Trying what?" "To figure out whether I was blind." "You were manipulated." "Maybe." That word sat between us. Maybe. "Maybe?" I repeated. "Olivia, yet there are just enough real pieces in this that I can't ignore it." And that was Mason's real talent. He had not invented a full affair out of clean air. He had done something smarter. He had taken ordinary life and rearranged it until it looked rotten. A cousin's funeral hug, a ride from a coworker, an old cloud-saved message from a college boyfriend, a social media story screenshot, a spoofed number, a timestamp shifted by minutes, just enough dirt to make a lie stick. "So what happens now?" I asked. "I don't know." "Do you love me?" He looked down at the cup, then said, "That's not the point." That answer told me everything. Love that can be pushed aside by a better organized fear is not sturdy love. By June, he filed for legal separation through the county clerk's office. Oh, I know because I held the stamped copy at the kitchen island where I used to sort grocery coupons and birthday cards. County clerk, case number, date. My married life reduced to typed labels and a seal. That was the same week the hydrangeas outside started blooming blue. I remember hating them for it. The separation didn't make the gossip louder, it made it quieter. Quiet is worse. Loud gossip burns hot and dies. Quiet gossip settles into people's eyes. Church friends stopped inviting me to backyard cookouts. My Aunt Donna, who used to text me every recipe she found on Facebook, sent exactly one message: praying for clarity. One of Ethan's cousins saw me at Kroger and looked right through me like I was a woman who collected other people's vows for sport. No one said she must be wicked. They said softer things. Aw, she always seemed sweet. You never really know people. Marriage is hard these days. Social media ruins women. Women. Not trust, not families, not manipulation. Women. The shame had a gender, and I could feel it in my bones. By August, staying in the house felt like sleeping inside an accusation. So I left. I signed a lease on a one-bedroom apartment over a nail salon with thin walls and beige carpet that smelled faintly of old air freshener. The parking lot faced a dentist's office and a Little Caesars. At night, motorcycles sighed along the highway, and somebody's television bled through the wall in bursts of laughter that never sounded real. It was not the life I thought I would have at 29, not even close. But the first night there, I locked the door, leaned back against it, and stood in the quiet with my boxes still half unpacked, and realized something that startled me. Silence can be lonely. It can also be loyal. Nobody in that apartment doubted me. Nobody in that apartment watched my mouth for guilt. Nobody in that apartment needed me to perform innocence for comfort. I worked more, took extra shifts, learned the lease renewal software well enough to become useful, ate too many microwave dinners, started keeping every receipt in a shoebox because fear makes accountants of women. On Tuesdays, I went to therapy with Dr. Patel, who wore silver bangles and never rushed me toward optimism. Her office smelled faintly of tea and paper. She listened in a way that made silence feel like structure instead of emptiness. One afternoon she asked, "Yet what do you lose if no one ever apologizes?" "The version of the world where fairness exists," I said. "And what do you keep?" I looked down at my hands. "Myself," I said. "I hope." "That's more than hope," she said quietly. "That's the work." Healing is not cinematic. It is not one sunrise. It is not a montage. It is not standing in a field forgiving the universe. It is rent due on the first. It is changing your address with the bank and the pharmacy and the county clerk. It is learning how to sleep without listening for somebody else turning over in bed. It is standing in the dishwasher aisle at Target deciding whether you deserve the nicer detergent pods because money is tight, but you are still a person. I started gathering pieces, not because I was plotting revenge, because I could not go on living underneath a lie without at least trying its seams. The first crack came from laziness. Mason reused an image. One night in October, I was cleaning out old cloud folders on my laptop when I found the original version of one of the screenshots he had sent Ethan. In Mason's copy, the timestamp was changed and one contact name was cropped, but the spacing near the battery icon was slightly off. Tiny. Ridiculous. The kind of thing nobody would notice unless they had been forced to stare at their own demolition long enough to memorize its angles. I printed both versions at the office, set them side by side, and felt something strange. Not triumph, calm. The second crack came from a number. The fake baby contact had a local area code, but a carrier lookup traced it to an app-based relay line. And I only found that because Mr. Keene, one of the maintenance guys at work, spent his lunch breaks listening to cybersecurity podcasts and had the exact kind of niche boredom that saves women at odd hours. He sat with half a turkey sandwich in the break room and showed me what spoofed lines looked like. "If somebody wanted to fake intimacy," he said, tapping the printout, "that's how they'd do it." He didn't pry, didn't ask for the whole story, just gave me information. No pity, No moral weather. I trusted him more for that. The third crack came from Mason's own mouth. Thanksgiving arrived with dry leaves, grocery store rolls, and the familiar heaviness of people trying to plate peace over rot. I almost didn't go to my parents' house, but absence gets rewritten too. If I stayed away, guilt would become the story. So I showed up with pecan pie and lipstick I didn't have the energy for, and sat under warm dining room light while my mother arranged deviled eggs, like order could save her from cowardice. Mason came in late. Of course he did. Smelling like expensive cologne and bourbon mints, wearing a navy quarter zip. That same practiced expression he used at funerals and job interviews, and any other place where sincerity could be worn like a blazer. He kissed my mother's cheek, clapped my father on the shoulder, then looked at me and said, low enough to sound intimate, "You look tired, Liv." I wanted to hit him in the mouth with the pie tin. Instead, I smiled. "You look rehearsed." His eyes flicked once, tiny, sharp. At dinner, he played worried brother, asked after Ethan in that careful tone. He told my aunt how sad it was when modern relationships got complicated, shook his head like a man disappointed in the age. Halfway through dessert, while my mother was carrying coffee in and my father was arguing about football with Uncle Ray, Mason leaned toward me and said quietly, "You could make this easier by stopping." Stopping what? Digging. "You should be more specific. You always were stubborn." Then he made the mistake that changed everything. He saw what happened on April 12th, he said. "Let it go." I turned to him slowly. "Interesting." His jaw tightened. "What?" "You said April 12th. So?" "So you told Mom you never read the messages, just the photos." For 1 second his face changed. That was all. Just 1 second. But I caught it. You do not always need a confession. Sometimes a flinch is enough. After Thanksgiving, I built a binder, not on my phone, not in the cloud, physical. 3 rings, plastic sleeves, tabs, original screenshots, altered screenshots, carrier lookup, metadata notes, texts from Mason, call logs, a full timeline written in black pen on yellow legal paper. I had what I could notarized because I was done being the only person in the room expected to function on trust. Dr. Patel called it evidence with edges. I called it oxygen. The deeper I went, the clearer Mason's motive became. 2 years earlier, after our grandmother died, there had been a fight over a small piece of land outside Bowling Green. My father wanted to divide the sale cleanly, but Mason wanted temporary control because he was better with money. I refused to sign a letter backing that arrangement after I learned he had taken cash advances against his credit cards and lied about it. He never forgave refusals. And there was Claire, a woman he had been seeing off and on while living with another girlfriend who thought they were exclusive. Claire showed up at my office once by accident or desperation, I still don't know which, crying in the lobby because she had found out about the other woman and knew I was his sister. I could have covered for him, could have said he was confused, complicated, going through something. Instead, I told her the truth. He lies when it serves him. Claire left looking hollow. 2 weeks later, Mason stopped speaking to me for a month. At the time, I thought it was temporary drama. Later I understood it differently. Men like Mason do not explode because of one moment. They tally, they wait, they file the injury away, they invest in revenge the way decent people invest in retirement. Christmas came wet and cold. Lights along gutters. Inflatable snowmen on front lawns, poinsettias at Kroger. The whole soft theatrical mercy of December. Ethan and I were barely speaking except through attorneys and clipped practical texts, and by then, I no longer wanted only to be believed. I wanted to understand the full shape of what had been done to me. The break came from an old phone. I had replaced mine the year before, but the old one was still in a kitchen drawer under rubber bands and expired coupons. One Saturday, I charged it on a whim, mostly to clear it out. Buried in the backup data was a password reset notification from an app I never actively used. Same day as one of the most damaging screenshots Mason had supposedly captured from my number. That led me to the recovery email. It wasn't mine. It was a variation of Mason's old gaming handle. I stared at the screen, then laughed, then cried, then laughed again with my hand over my mouth so the neighbor wouldn't hear. Not because it was funny, because cruelty is often smartest at the top and sloppiest at the bottom. I took the phone to an attorney recommended by Dr. Patel's husband, who worked in family law. Mr. Wells' office smelled like copier toner and peppermint. Framed diplomas lined the wall. He read my binder for 20 straight minutes without interrupting, turning pages carefully, occasionally making one small note with a pen. Finally, he said, "This is more than marital misunderstanding. I know. This edges into fraud, impersonation, possibly defamation depending on damages. Can I prove enough?" He leaned back. "You can prove movement," he said. "Sometimes movement is enough." That was enough for me. Not because I wanted a dramatic courtroom spectacle, because I needed the lie to stop sounding like interpretation. Some things are not perspectives. Some things are constructions. Mr. Wells sent preservation letters, requested records, organized my mess of grief and ink and screenshots into something a court or a clerk or a cautious spouse could not dismiss quite so easily. I learned more than I ever wanted to know about metadata, relay apps, login trails, account recovery patterns, timestamps, and digital edits. And I spent lunch breaks in my car eating crackers and highlighting dates. I sat in courthouse hallways beneath muted televisions while men argued about property taxes near vending machines and thought, so this is survival now. Not brave-looking, not cinematic. Paper, waiting, fluorescent lights, a woman refusing to disappear. By March, Ethan called, not texted, called. I was walking out of CVS with allergy pills and toilet paper when his name lit up my screen. Wind shoved my hair into my mouth. The receipt crackled against the plastic bag in my hand. I almost let it ring out. Then I answered. "Hello?" He was quiet for a beat, then said, "I need to see you." We met at the same coffee shop near the interstate, the same table, the same smell of scorched espresso, the same tired spring light in the windows. This time he looked worse. Not merely tired, undone. He slid his phone across the table toward me. On the screen was a forwarded report from a digital forensics consultant his attorney had hired after Mr. Wells pushed the evidence into the separation process. The report was technical and dry and brutal in exactly the way truth should be when emotion has been used as camouflage. Account recovery activity, image edits, login patterns, relay numbers, cross-platform timing, merciless. I have a particular respect for merciless truth. Ethan's voice broke once when he said, "I read it 3 times. And? And he made it. Yes. He built the whole thing." I looked out the window at a teenage girl carrying a tray of iced drinks back to her car. The world kept moving with such insulting normalcy it almost made me angry. Yet Ethan lowered his face into his hands for a second, then looked up. "I am so sorry." "You should be." "I know." "You left." "I know." "You filed." "I know." "You let him turn me into something filthy in your mind." He nodded like each word had already been living in him. "I know." Apologies sound different once you have already paid for your own peace. A year earlier, his remorse might have felt like rescue. Now it felt like information. He told me he confronted Mason the night before. Mason denied it first, then minimized it, then framed it as concern. Then, finally, when pressure pinned him, blamed me for making him desperate after I refused to help him with the land issue and refused to cover for him with Claire. According to Ethan, he said, Olivia likes to act pure. That somebody had to show people who she really is. That sentence should have broken me. Instead, it clarified everything. He didn't just want money, didn't just want leverage, didn't just want revenge in the abstract. He wanted narrative ownership. He wanted to decide what kind of woman I was in other people's eyes. He wanted to put his dirt on my name and call it truth. Ethan cried, not loudly, no performance, no scene. Just silent tears moving down a face I had once kissed in grocery store parking lots after late-night ice cream runs. I watched him cry and felt grief, anger, tenderness, contempt, and distance all at once. A messy weather, a real one. Did you ever think about what it cost me? I asked. Oh, while you were deciding whether I was worth believing? Every day. That's convenient now. I deserve that. Yes, I said. You do. He asked if we could talk about counseling, about starting over, about whether anything might still be salvageable. I told him salvage and trust are not twins. I told him remorse is not restoration. I told him I needed time. Then I stood up, threw away my cup, and left him there with his report, his grief, and the scream of the espresso machine behind the counter. In the months that followed, my life got quieter and better at the same time. I moved into property management full-time. Better salary, better insurance, more responsibility, more respect. I bought a used Honda CR-V after my old sedan died in a Kroger parking lot like it had finally grown tired of witnessing my life. I started sleeping through most nights. I stopped checking whether Ethan had viewed my messages because there were fewer messages to send. The separation became divorce, though not as cleanly as anyone expected. Ethan didn't contest the terms. He paid what he owed. He wrote me a letter I didn't read for 6 weeks. When I finally opened it, it was thoughtful and broken and late. He understood, finally, that being deceived did not erase the fact that he had failed me in the fire. That mattered. Not enough to erase, enough to register. We met a few times after that, walks in public parks, long talks in parked cars at dusk, one dinner where neither of us finished the food. He didn't push, didn't beg, didn't ask forgiveness like it was a receipt due on delivery. And when I told him the worst part was not that he believed Mason for a moment, but that once doubt entered, he found it easier to investigate me than stand beside me while the lie was tested, he didn't defend himself. He just sat there with the truth. A husband can be manipulated. A husband can also choose where he stands while the dust settles. He had chosen wrong. That stayed in the room between us every time we met, even if the room was just my car outside a pharmacy with the engine off and the windshield ticking under light rain. The next fall, I bought a townhouse. Not huge, not flashy. Brick front. Quiet development. Strict HOA rules about mailbox colors and trash cans. Tiny fenced patio. White blinds I hated. A narrow staircase that creaked on the third step. A kitchen with enough light to make morning feel honest. I signed the papers with a hand that barely shook, then sat in my car afterward, staring at the folder on the passenger seat, like it was a passport into a country I had not expected to reach. Home can be a comfort. It can also be a witness. When I moved in, I carried the first boxes alone on purpose. I wanted the walls to know who had done this, not my parents, not a husband, not some generous rescue. Me. I painted the bedroom a warm gray, bought a clearance couch, learned which cabinet door stuck in humid weather, hung a framed print over the mantel, started making Sunday pasta for myself without apologizing to the air. It is not sad to feed the life that stayed. Around that time, Mason's own life started collapsing in visible ways. First, the job. He had been in sales for a regional equipment company, the kind of role that rewards charm and punishes documentation. Internal review found expense fraud and client misrepresentation, not enough for handcuffs, enough for termination. My father called it a misunderstanding. My mother called it stress. People who spend decades translating male damage into softer language deserve awards for stamina, not morality. Then the breakup. Not Claire. There had been others. The latest woman, Brianna, threw him out after learning he had opened a card in her name to help with cash flow. She posted one controlled, devastating Facebook status about financial abuse and boundaries. I didn't react. I did read every comment. Then, the debt. Collections letters. A truck repossessed. 3 months behind on rent. A loan from my father that vanished like all the others. Then the drinking got too visible to disguise. My aunt mentioned he smelled like vodka at noon during a July 4th cookout. My mother cried in the powder room after dessert. My father said, "The boys had some bad luck." Bad luck, as if he had wandered into weather instead of manufacturing it. By winter, nobody wanted him for long. My parents let him stay twice, but he screamed at my father about money and punched the pantry door hard enough to crack the frame. A cousin in Nashville took him in for 10 days, then locked his tools in the garage until he left. Brianna filed paperwork over the card debt. One of Mason's former friends made a social media post about being done cleaning up manipulative men. The pattern had reached daylight. That matters. Manipulation works best when every victim believes they are alone. Once the stories line up, the spell gets weaker. I had nearly stopped expecting a final collision when it came. It was February. Cold rain. Wind pushing water against the front windows in soft slaps. The kind of night that makes even healthy houses feel watchful. I had changed into old pajama pants. Tomato soup had been on the stove. The smell of toasted bread still lingered in the kitchen. My phone was beside a grocery list and unopened mail. I was about to load the dishwasher when the doorbell rang. Not a polite press. A long, uncertain hold. I went still. The bell cut through the house again. I crossed the entryway and looked through the peephole. A man stood under my porch light with a duffel bag at his feet and rain darkening the shoulders of his jacket. For a suspended second, I didn't know him. Then I did. Mason. He looked older than he should have. Puffiness under the eyes, beard grown and patchy, a cut near his chin. The tired ruin of a man who keeps assuming one more lie will carry him over a bridge that has already collapsed. He pressed the bell again. I opened the inner door, but kept the storm door locked. He lifted his head slowly. "Hey, Liv?" I said nothing. "Can we talk?" There are moments that arrive already mirrored. Him outside, me inside, a threshold between us. Once, he had used lies to make me feel unworthy inside my own home. Now he stood under my porch light asking entry into mine. Rain hissed along the gutter. A car passed at the end of the street, tires whispering over wet asphalt. I could smell damp concrete and the clean, warm scent of my own house behind me. "Why are you here?" I asked. I need a place for a couple nights." "No." "Olivia." "No. I've got nowhere else." "That sounds familiar." He flinched. Good. Not because I wanted drama. Because some truths deserve to land at full weight. He put one hand against the door frame. Not pushing, just bracing. "Mom said you might be reasonable." "Then Mom hasn't been paying attention." "I know I messed up. You engineered my divorce." "I was going through a lot." "So was I said. "Because of you." He looked past me then into the house. At the lamp on the console table. At the rug I chose. At the framed print on the wall. At the settled light of a life built without him. And I saw it. The exact second he understood this wasn't temporary. Wasn't decorative. Wasn't some little female coping project he could step around. I had really built something. See, envy has a shape. I knew it instantly. "Nice place," he said. "Don't." He swallowed. The old reflex rose in me for a second. Offer a towel. Offer a chair. Be the softer person. Keep the peace. Don't leave your brother in the rain. Then something harder, truer, more expensive rose after it. He had left me in suspicion while I begged for air. He could stand outside 5 more minutes. Why did you do it? I asked. I said I was sorry. That's not an answer. You always needed things spelled out. No. You always hid in vagueness. He looked tired suddenly, angry at being required to speak plain. You always needed to be the good one, he muttered. No. Yes. His face tightened. Dad listened to you. Ethan listened to you. Everybody thought you were so solid, so you tried to make me dirty. I needed people to see you weren't perfect. There it was. Small, mean, true. Not some grand motive, not a secret inheritance war, not a hidden trauma confession that made him noble by damage. Resentment. A man angry that decency in the room made his own chaos visible. You didn't want me imperfect, I said. You wanted me abandoned. He looked away. You wanted him to leave. I didn't think it would go that far. That's a lie you tell yourself, I said. He rubbed a hand over his mouth. Fine, he snapped softly. Maybe I did. Why? He looked up at me then, wet under my porch light, face hollowed by rain and failure, and some childish fury he had never outgrown. Because you always had somewhere to land. The rain sounded louder after that. Maybe because the silence inside me cleared. He had finally said it in plain English. He hated my stability, so he reached for the floorboards. Some betrayals are storms, some are jealous hands. I unlocked the storm door. His face changed. Hope. Immediate. Embarrassingly quick. I opened it halfway. He shifted like he was about to come in. I held up my hand. Not yet. He stopped. You're going to stand there and hear me. Olivia, please. No. I stepped closer. Close enough that he had to look at me. You used my husband's fear, I said. You used pictures from a funeral. You used rides from coworkers. You used scraps from ordinary days and stitched me into a woman I had never been. He stared at the porch boards. Look at me. Slowly, he did. You took my safety first, I said, then my marriage, then my name. But people looked at me like I was cheap because you needed somewhere to dump your own filth. I know. No, I said. You know now because nobody wants you. That landed. I saw it hit. His mouth twitched. His shoulders shifted. Shame and pride fighting for the last word. I had imagined this moment many times, in the apartment over the nail salon, on sleepless nights, while folding laundry, while driving to work, while standing in grocery lines. In some versions, I slammed the door immediately. In others, I cut him to ribbons with perfect lines. In one version, I called the police before he finished a sentence. What I felt instead was colder, cleaner, mercy without access. That was the line. You can come in for one night, I said. He blinked. What? One night, guest room, no alcohol, no excuses, no wandering through my house. You leave at 9 tomorrow morning. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. I mean it. You're not here because we're family in the old way, I said. You're here because I refuse to become what you are. I stepped back. He came inside dripping rain onto my rug. I handed him an old towel without touching his hand. I put a glass of water on the counter and watched him take in the kitchen, like the room itself might accuse him. Good houses do that. They keep memory in the corners. He asked if Ethan knew where I lived now. That is none of your business, I said. He nodded, looked down. I gave him the guest room. A blanket. No extra softness. Before I went upstairs, I stopped at the bottom of the staircase and said, at 8:30 tomorrow, you will sit at my dining table and call Mom and Dad on speaker. Bet you will tell them exactly what you did. He froze. That's not necessary. It is the only reason you are here. Olivia. Sleep or leave. He slept. I didn't. Some nights do not want rest. They want witness. I sat on the edge of my bed listening to the wind push against the townhouse and thought about all the versions of me that had led there. The girl smoothing her skirt before family dinners, the wife rereading fake screenshots with numb fingers, the woman at the DMV with her little paper number, the tenant over the nail salon, the patient in therapy learning that explanation is not the same thing as dignity. Pain can make you smaller. It can also make you exact. At 8:30, Mason came to the table in yesterday's clothes, looking gray and older. I had already made coffee, but I didn't offer him any. But morning light came through the blinds in pale stripes across the table. My phone sat between us on speaker. I called my mother first, then my father joined. "Olivia?" my mother said immediately, voice already strained. "What is this?" my father asked. I looked at Mason. "Tell them!" Silence. He rubbed both hands over his face. "Now," I said. His voice came out rough. "I faked it." My mother inhaled sharply. "Faked what?" my father barked. "The messages," Mason said. "The screenshots. Most of it." "Most?" my father snapped. "Some photos were real. I changed the context." "Oh my God," my mother whispered. "I sent Ethan material to make it look like Olivia was cheating." "Why would you say that?" my father demanded, like the wording mattered more than the act. "He's not saying it," I said. He's confessing it." Mason's eyes flicked toward me and away. "Because I was angry," he muttered. "Angry about what?" "Everything." "Not good enough," I said quietly. "Keep going." My mother started crying. For years that sound would have pulled me apart. Not anymore. He admitted the fake accounts, the edited timestamps, the recovery email, the funeral photo, the ride from the plumber, the old cloud message he twisted, the relay number, the way he wanted Ethan to distrust me, the way he thought if my marriage broke, I would need family more and stop acting above people. That phrase made my father swear. My mother cried harder. Mason kept speaking because I didn't let him stop. He admitted he resented the house, resented Ethan, resented the way our father always thought Olivia was responsible, resented the fact that when things fell apart, people still expected me to function. He said enough, more than enough. By the time the call ended, my kitchen felt different, not healed, clean. Truth aired out. Mason sat there staring at the grain of the table. "I didn't think you'd make me do that," he said finally. "That's because you mistake silence for weakness." At 9, I set his duffel bag by the door. He stood up slowly, shoulders rounded, no anger left sharp enough to hide behind. He looked around once more, not at the furniture this time, at the settled evidence of a life, the bowl by the keys, the clean counter, the coat on the peg, the coffee mug in the sink, the houseplants in the window, routine, peace, structure, and all the things he had once tried to take from me without ever admitting that was what he wanted. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked. "A motel, rehab, a shelter, a friend, somewhere that is not here." "You'd really put me out after everything?" I almost smiled at the audacity. "Listen to yourself." "I'm your brother." "You were." That was the hardest line I have ever said calmly, also the truest. He picked up the duffel. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. "Do you ever think maybe you're punishing me because it feels good?" "No." "Then what is this?" "A boundary with a door on it." He looked like he wanted one last fight, one last clean excuse, one last moment where I raised my voice and he could go tell the story his favorite way. Olivia was cruel. Olivia was cold. Olivia was vindictive. I gave him none of that. I opened the door. Cold morning air moved into the house. He stepped outside. This time, I did not stand there hoping the lock would turn for me. I was the hand on the lock. After he left, I stood in my kitchen with both palms flat against the counter. The same posture Ethan had used once while deciding whether I was the woman in those papers. Morning light striped the floor. A trash truck beeped in reverse outside. The house smelled like coffee and clean wood polish. I breathed. Not a dramatic breath, a settled one. My parents came that afternoon. My mother's eyes were swollen. My father looked like a man who had finally run out of euphemisms. They apologized badly first, then better, then honestly. There is a hierarchy to remorse. Most people stop too early. Jung, I should have protected you, my mother said. Yes, I answered. I should have known him better, my father said. You should have believed me sooner. He nodded once, hard. Agreement can bruise a person too. I saw that then. I did not absolve them on the spot. People like to call forgiveness maturity. Sometimes restraint is the more mature thing. Sometimes the cleanest love you can offer yourself is refusing to make other people comfortable too soon. Ethan called that evening. My mother had already told him what happened. He asked if I was okay. I said yes. He asked if Mason had hurt me. I said no. Then he asked, after a pause that carried all the history between us, "Can I come by?" I looked around the room before I answered. The couch I bought alone, the framed print over the mantel. Here, the little nick on the baseboard from moving the bookshelf wrong. The lamp I chose. The house I paid for. The life arranged by my own hands. "Tomorrow," I said. "Okay," he answered. When he arrived the next day, he stood on my porch almost the way Mason had. Not ruined, not swaggering, not entitled, careful, humbled. That difference mattered. I let him in. We sat at the same dining table where I had made my brother confess. Rain tapped lightly against the back windows. Ethan looked around the room slowly, taking in the plants, the order, the quiet architecture of a life I had built while he was somewhere else mourning too late. "You made something beautiful," he said. "I made something safe." He nodded, then said, "But I failed to be that for you. Yes, I know saying it doesn't fix it. No, I still need to say it." So he did, not in grand speeches, in specifics. That he should have come home instead of leaving. That filing was easier than courage. That once Mason gave him a story, he looked at me through the story instead of standing beside me while it was tested. That fear ranked higher than intimacy when it mattered most. That he chose distance at the exact hour I needed loyalty. Specific remorse is the only kind worth hearing. I listened. Then I told him the truest thing I had learned in the worst year of my life. Belief given late is not the same thing as belief given under fire. He closed his eyes for a second. I know. And I'm not the woman from before. I know. That may mean there is no way back. I know. He said it right that time. Not bargaining, not defensive, not trying to convert pain into possibility too quickly, just true. We talked for 3 hours about the report, about Mason, about loneliness, about the difference between loving someone and protecting them, about what marriage becomes when suspicion offers one person an exit and the other a trial. He asked if there was any possibility for us at all. I told him possibility is not promise. He accepted that too. Months later, we started therapy together. Slowly. Not as a reunion scene. Not because I needed my marriage restored to prove I had value. But because sometimes two people can stand inside damage with the lights on and tell the truth long enough to see whether anything living remains. I do not need every story to end in reconciliation to feel whole. That may be the biggest change of all. If Ethan and I build something again, it will not be the old thing. I will not crawl back into innocence just because remorse finally arrived. I will not become the woman who gratefully accepts late belief as if it carries the same weight as loyalty at the moment of impact. But I will say this for him. After failing the first hard thing, he did the second hard thing. He returned without entitlement. He listened without asking me to make his guilt easier. He let trust move at the pace of my nervous system instead of the pace of his regret. Whether that becomes a second marriage, or a slow friendship, or some quieter unfinished thing, I can live with that uncertainty. My dignity no longer depends on being chosen after damage. That is the deepest revenge, maybe. Not that Mason lost nearly everything, though he did. Not that my parents finally saw the son they protected in full light, though they did. Not even that Ethan learned too late what kind of woman I had been all along. It is this. The lie did not get to keep me. A false story can burn down a room. It cannot raise a woman who has decided to build in brick. I used to think vindication would feel hot, like triumph, like shouting, like the perfect sentence dropped at the perfect time. It doesn't. It feels like paying your mortgage on time, like sleeping through the night, like knowing exactly who gets your explanation and who gets your silence. I like not tightening your body at family dinners, like hearing the doorbell and understanding, in your bones, that you decide who enters. Mason still sends occasional texts from changing numbers, half apologies, requests for money, updates about treatment programs, one picture of a church bulletin, one message that simply said, "I'm trying." I do not answer most of them. When I do, it is one sentence long. Information, not invitation. My mother asks sometimes whether I think he can change. Maybe. People do change. But change is not a bridge back into my living room. The first spring in this townhouse, I planted herbs in cheap terracotta pots out on the patio. Basil, rosemary, mint. One afternoon, I stood there watering them while neighborhood kids rode scooters past and somebody 2 doors down grilled hamburgers. The air smelled like cut grass and charcoal, ordinary in exactly the way I once thought I had lost forever. I stood there in that light and thought about the woman I had been that first night, barefoot in the kitchen, towel over one arm, printer paper spread out like a verdict, trying to explain herself back into being loved. I wish I could go back and tell her something. Not everyone who doubts you deserves front row seats to your repair. Some people get your evidence. Some get your silence. Some get a closed door and the sound of the lock. And you survive anyway. More than survive. You become exact. You become clear. You become the kind of woman who can hear the bell ring, look through the glass, and know without shaking whether the person outside belongs in the warmth. Sometimes justice is loud, sometimes it is paperwork, a patience, and a deadbolt under your own hand. Sometimes it is a brother standing under your porch light, hearing, finally, the truth in your voice without any room left to edit it. And sometimes it is simpler than that. Sometimes justice is just this. The house is yours, the story is yours, the name is yours, and the lie is out in the rain where it belongs.